Leonardo did linen draperies, but towards the end of his life he's doing these extraordinary what I call geological draperies, which seem to be active results of some kind of pressures and stretching and twisting. This is the Lydian Child and St. Anne in the Louvre, but wow, what a drawing. Just fantastic in technique and in the sense that the folds are no longer static, but there seem to be expressions of living forces of compression, of tension, and in response to the density, the thickness, the nature and behaviour of the material. Just a miraculous drawing, so nobody else did them quite this way. Folding has become, in modern architecture, a major motif. It couldn't previously be a major motif because you simply couldn't build folded forms. And if I took out, and I hasten to have this as a clean handkerchief, if I take that out and drop it on the floor, that's a stable structure. It may not be a very nice building, but it's a stable structure because all the forms are resolved within the skin of the form. So potentially it's of interest. You can't simply scale up, you can't simply say I'll make that in concrete and hope it'll work, but nonetheless it's now the great early folder of course is Frank Gehry. The Bilbao Museum at the top and the Los Angeles Council Hall, the concert hall, Disney Council Hall? Oh, concert hall. I saw it going up and it is absolutely full of girders. The outside skin is not what holds it up, it's not literally folding, but there's an enormous amount of metal work going on in there. But for Gehry, there's parallels with fishes, but also with folding, and he's incredibly interested in artistic folding. And the way, this may be semi-legendary, like a lot of these things, I actually wrote to him and got no response, is that he was building a house for Peter Lewis, the insurance magnate, who I do know, met, and Peter Lewis commissioned Gehry to do a house. And Gehry was coming up with lots of separate pavilions and bits in this house, and it wasn't really going anywhere. Lewis was beginning to rather despair of ever getting the house. And the legend has it that one of Gehry's assistants overnight put a piece of felt over the pavilions, and it would look so good that they then cast it in the Renaissance manner. And that's the model there. Peter Lewis thinks this is true. To me as a historian it sounds a little bit too good to be true. But a lot of these legends end up by having a kind of quotient of truth. Anyway, whatever it, the Gehry process is actually of having a substructure, a basic armature, and then the folding goes on top. That's undoubted. So the folding is structural in as much as it's a roof, but it's not structural in terms of the overall building. I've turned the Bellini on its side there to give you an idea. And just another parallel one, which I think he almost certainly knows, is the great Bernini tomb of Alexander VIII in the Vatican. This extraordinary porphyry drapery, which somehow, that's great tongues, somehow has a likeness and the lift, skeletons being covered over by this, so the Pope is, as it were, treating death. And Gehry is very articulate and very interested in old master painting, so this is not the historian's abstract fantasy, but does bear some relationship with that. The other great early folder is Daniel Libeskind. The Denver Museum of Art is a spectacular example. Again, enormous amounts of metal work. The girder work, and you can still see some inside, is just massive. They're very heavy buildings, very engineered buildings. And the story he tells is that he conceived the form of the Denver Art Museum on the plane to America and had a folded serviette. This is a folded serviette. It tells you that Gehry doesn't travel economy class, I have to say. The Daniel Libeskind, not Gehry. But there you can see, and this is, I went into a serviette folding site on the web, and this is one which I trawled down. Doing these things get you into some rather interesting places. So here's a rather different vision of folding, and I think Libeskind knows it's it's a simplified version of the origin of Denver Museum. Almost impossible museum to work with. The walls are all sloping. To put a vertical label, you have to wedge it out because the walls are sloping. It's like Frank Lloyd Wright when somebody said, Frank, what about the works of art in the Guggenheim Museum? He said the building is the work of art. So I think both Gary and Libeskind give the same kind of answer. They're exciting buildings, but very difficult to work with. I had dinner with the director, and he wasn't responsible for the design, but he got rather shirty with him. I said, I thought this is the impossible building for anything other than big modern sculpture, which was wonderful. But we're intending to hold an exhibition on Leonardo, and you can imagine Leonardo drawings and these sloping walls that just look fine. Yeah. But what both Gary and Libeskind do, as I've implied or said already, is that there's a lot of armature, a lot of steel holding up all this stuff. Younger architects and some more ambitious computer-driven engineers are actually thinking about folding as the chief structure of the building. This is a young Greek artist trained in Holland, now working in Greece, whose projects are mainly theoretical at this stage, called Sophia Itsoviti, who, as you can see, has written various books, including folding architecture. That's one of the models at the top. Simply a jeu d'esprit, as it were, but that's a stable structure, and probably the way it may look, because it's all resolved itself, even with bits through underneath. Now, as I say, you can't go up and do that in concrete, because a lot has to come in, or in any other material for that matter. But the aspiration is to make the skin of the building, the outer skin of the building, that all the structural elements are resolved, all the forms and forces are all resolved in that area. The bottom one on the right is one of the few projects he's executed, which is in a hairdressing salon in Greece, which I'm not quite sure how far it's called Cut in Thessaloniki anyway. I'm not quite sure how far the people in the hairdressing salon are aware that they're actually at the cutting edge of the latest design. That wasn't meant to be a pun. Cutting edge, somebody might have picked it up. It wasn't deliberate. But interestingly, in this way, I have mashing things together, which probably got no obvious connection. And this is one of the illustrations of Stephen Hawking's theories of the wormhole. So the only way to get from one side of the galaxy to the other in a reasonable time would seem if we could warp space-time so much that we create a little tube or wormhole. This could connect the two sides of the galaxy and act as a shortcut. And by coincidence, the diagram of this, which of course is diagramming something, or the model which is diagramming something which is unmodelable in terms of our coordinates of reference, but does its best, ends up by looking remarkably like this is the reception desk, by the way, of the hairdressers. It may be a trivial resemblance, but the notion of folding as a solution to a cosmic problem and to cutting-edge architecture designs is interesting, to me at least.